Hey, what's going on, everyone? Okay. Cool. All right. Okay, so I'm going to wait a little while and make sure I got these earphones in. Usually get them in the wrong way. Eric, what is going on? Long time no hear. Hope all is well. Carlos, the man of the hour. Let me know what you're up to this weekend. By the way, that one thing in Austin got canceled. Um, I'm pretty sure I texted you and notified you of that, but I don't know if I maybe forgot to do that. It got postponed to I think November, early November, maybe the first Saturday in November or something like that. Jacoby, probably pronounced your name wrong. Let me know if I got it right. Let me know what you guys are up to this weekend. We're going to begin pretty soon. Just give me a sec. Okay, cool. So I got my standard weekly cup of organic coffee. Kind of ran out of glasses, so I'm just using like this random one here. But I hope you guys brought your coffee, and I hope it's organic too. And you guys are definitely drinking out of glass or stainless steel, and trying to avoid drinking, especially hot liquids, out of plastics for sure. So, okay, cool. Gotta catch my breath a little bit, so I got my notes here. Boom, Eric. Preparations. Cool. I don't know what that is. Let me know what is that an event or something? I'm not familiar with that or anything. So um, let me know what it is. And you guys, all the time, remember these lives are for you. I do post them in the group. They're pretty much indefinitely on there. Okay, so if you can't ever catch these on the moment exactly as I do them live, it's usually on Saturday around like 12 or 1 p.m. You're welcome to always check them out there. So. So today, you guys, we're going to be covering different stress management techniques, which I think is very important, especially in the fast-paced Western world. A lot of people can get like overly stressed very easily by having too much things to attend to. And I think one of the most important things to remember is, you guys, whenever you're dealing with any health issue, just know that it's very important to realize that you're never going to be able to change just one thing and resolve all of your health issues, whatever that may be, even super minor stuff. It usually requires attending to at least a few different variables, if not like a myriad of different variables. Maybe not all at the same time, but eventually throughout the journey of the complete resolution of that health issue, whether it's like depression or high blood pressure or low back pain, or just maybe having too much excess body weight or something of that sort. It's never going to be like with excess body weight, like I mentioned on all of our lives. It's never going to be like I just need to change my diet and work out more. That's pretty much the equivalent of telling a person with drinking problems, for example, that all they need to do is just stop drinking and all their issues will disappear. And on the surface, I mean, obviously they just need to stop drinking because having a lot of alcohol in your weekly schedule isn't a good idea. But there are obviously a myriad of issues that are leading to a person to abuse alcohol. And it's the same thing with food abuse too. People that overeat for their body type and activity level and thus gain too much weight, and stuff of that sort. So it's never going to be like I just need to change one variable and pretty much all my health issues will resolve, etc., etc. You might at best get like some kind of short-term relief and some kind of short-term progress, but eventually you'll hit a plateau or you'll revert back and stuff of that sort, and then you'll be back exactly to where you began, if not with any more health issues. I don't know, I had a tough workout today, a little bit short on breath, so I'm gonna inhale one time really deep, exhale, and we'll go from there. So David, Joel, good to see you. Thanks for jumping in. I hope you guys are doing well. We'll be talking about stress and how to manage stress in today's fast-paced world. Daryl, thank you. I appreciate it a lot. So I try to put a lot of thought into these, and I definitely put them through use with a lot of clients as well and myself. So I try to provide realistic advice that could actually be applied in the real world under real world demands. And some of it may not be easy, but then again, anything usually worth pursuing is never easily attained, right? As the saying goes. So yeah, I mean, that's the first and most important thing. Changing one variable is not gonna most likely help you come to a complete resolution of your symptoms. And I personally see this a lot with psychiatric drugs, people that take antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, whatever, and all they do is just take those drugs and don't really create honest and lasting change in their weekly schedule or their belief system. What ends up happening is they just end up being on these drugs, and usually it works for a little bit and then it kind of plateaus out, and then they need to up the dose and it works for a little bit and then it plateaus out, and then it just stops working altogether. Then they're on 2 different antidepressants and kind of helps a little bit, and then it plateaus out, and then they're, etc. They're on 3 antidepressants, then an anti-anxiety as well, and this is how it progresses. So that's one example of what happens. Usually what I see what happens when people just pursue changing one variable in their health issue and just foolishly thinking that that is all they're going to need to do, and somehow miraculously their health issues are going to resolve. Unfortunately, the human mind and the human body, and even more complicated, the human spirit, is far more complicated than just like tinkering with one variable here and there. Not that you can't get results, but it's, from my observation, is definitely not long lasting. You'll get maybe some short-term benefits, possibly, which could, free up some mental space in allowing you to understand that you need to step back and approach it like more holistically. I hate using the word holistic. I feel it's overused and kind of cheesy. But tackling things from multiple levels and multiple vantage points is going to be a sure resolution to whatever you're struggling with. Gut issues, back pain, anxiety, depression, sleepless nights, excess body weight, alcohol issues, drug issues, etc., etc. So stuff of that sort. So with stress, what's important to consider is taking your total stress load into consideration. I actually brought a graphic. Let me see here. I put it here somewhere. So taking your total stress load, and since it's the weekend, guys, any of you guys can do this. It's a very easy exercise. So what you want to do is you want to get a blank piece of paper, and in the middle of that piece of paper, just kind of draw like a semi-large circle and write total stress load. And then all around it, draw little bubbles pointing to that total stress load, like arrows that are pointing to that total stress load of all the stresses you have in your life right now. So like what I do with clients is before we begin, obviously I give them an hour kind of Q&A where you find out like what their goals are. But another thing I do is an in-depth lifestyle assessment. And part of that in-depth lifestyle assessment is like an HAQ. It's a large questionnaire. And basically after they're done, this kind of chart pops up and it tells me their total stress load on their body, from their emotional health to their digestive health, musculoskeletal health, adrenal health, hormonal health, etc., etc. So, for example, if you have gut issues, that's a stressor on your body. A lot of times people think like stress is just mental stress. That's a part of it for sure. But a stress is especially any chronic burden that's placed on your body or your psyche, right? So if you have chronic gut issues, you would want to include that as a stressor. It's a burden on your body. It's something your central nervous system and immune system has to deal with and constantly fight off. It is very taxing and thus stressful on your body, okay? Depending on the severity of it too. If it's mild and chronic, it's annoying, but it's still a stressor. But if it's clinical significance, very painful, that's even a big stressor, right? And a detriment to your daily schedule and stuff of that sort. How's your body feeling? Do you have low back pain? Do you have knee pain? Do you have neck pain? Etc., etc. If you have low back pain, for example, you would want to write that down as a stressor. So if you have gut pain and low back pain, then you have 2 stressors. Then you'd want to write that down and then see how it accumulates into your total stress load. Some other issues are like, do you constantly feel tired and have sleepless nights? I would even write that down as a stressor as well. Like financial issues. Do you sit in traffic often? a lot of times people don't know, but just driving a car is actually very stressful and taxing on the central nervous system. You have to be very amped up. You have to be very alert too, to make sure to stay in the lanes. You have to be aware of all the moving cars and the moving pieces, the traffic lights, etc., etc. So if you're in traffic a lot or driving a lot, I would even write something like that down. And I know it's common, but just because it's common doesn't mean it's good for you, okay? So that's where a lot of people get confused on as well, especially with a lot of my like middle manager clients or district managers or executive type clients. They've been living such a fast-paced lifestyle for so long, they've kind of normalized it to be able to cope with it. But it's usually not normal to have to work so many hours, etc., etc. So it's important to decipher in modern society of like, yes, this is very common, but ask, is it actually good for me? And most of the time, it's probably not. And if you look up general statistics of how healthy people are today, in America especially, you have 9 out of 10 people that are metabolically sick. That's 90% of people. About 75% of Americans are either overweight or obese, 75 or 80%. 33, I think 30+% of people are in some kind of psychiatric medication, with 70+% of Americans on some type of pharmaceutical drug altogether. These are all signs, among a myriad of other issues, these are all signs and symptoms of a biological organism that's not being managed properly. Because if you're managing a biological organism which has evolved over a couple million years, and the Homo sapien physique, which is what we have now, has been around for 200,000 years, if you actually live in tune with how it's evolved and eat with the way a human being is supposed to be eating, sleep with the way that a human being is supposed to be sleeping, etc., etc., you won't need a lot of these drugs, any of these drugs. I have almost 40 years old. No medical drugs whatsoever, no steroids, hormones, whatever. Nothing. Timothy, good to see you. Donald, good to see you as well. David, thank you for jumping in. So that's what you want to do. You want to basically this weekend take a blank piece of paper, write out a large circle, write your total stress load on that circle, and then start listing everything that's stressing you out, and just see how large the stress load is. And don't downplay things just because it's maybe not stressful for someone else. You should write it down if it's stressful for you. This exercise is about you, not like how other people are coping with that stress and stuff of that sort, which there most likely aren't if you actually get to know them in detail. So for example, so once you write down your total stress load, it's important to take action on it, because a lot of times, especially with health information, a lot of it's just very easy to understand intellectually, and a lot of people get stuck at that phase. They're like, yeah, I get it intellectually, but I'm like, are you actually really honestly doing it and taking action on this knowledge day in and day out? Because it's the taking action part that is going to benefit you, not just understanding it intellectually. You're not trying to be like a teacher here or a professor. You're trying to actually be healthy in the real world. On top of that, in a world that doesn't facilitate mental or physical health to a large degree, which is why 9 out of 10 Americans right now are metabolically sick, 30% are on psychiatric drugs, 70% on some kind of pharmaceutical drug, etc., etc., with close to 50% of Americans developing cancer in their lifetime, which is super crazy if you think about it. That's like if you go out this weekend with your friends and it's like 4 of you, 2 of you are going to get cancer and 1 of you will die from it, because half of people that develop cancer in their lifetime end up dying from it. So imagine that. And then also take into consideration that 1 out of 3 Americans dies from a heart attack. So basically out of that table of 4, 1 person will die from cancer, 1 person will die from a heart attack, which is 50% toss-up right there, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. So once you, okay, sorry, I'm getting these messages here. Sorry about that, guys. So once you develop your total stress load and do that exercise, you want to see what you want to take action on. And the easier stuff to take action on, easier from my opinion, but sometimes it could be difficult depending on the circumstance and the person, are like, for example, if you do have gut issues, okay, let's take action on that. So maybe like get a GI map test done, okay? And see where the reading is, see what's going on, and then be able to take action on there. Or if you have back issues, get a spine assessment or a spine assessment, a back assessment of this sort, etc., and see if you can take action on that. And there's so many, I covered so many different videos on both of these topics. If you guys like, just leave a comment for me to help you link those to those videos. I'm not going to cover them in detail here. And so I'm kind of thinking, should I actually talk about them in a little bit of detail here? Let's cover it, okay? Let's just cover a brief summary, but once again, you guys, if you need a more detailed video, I've done one specifically focused on these. So let's say you do have gut issues. I mean, some steps I would personally take is definitely start off with getting a GI map test done. You need to do this through a registered dietitian. I actually do this as part of my programs, but I do work in tandem with a registered dietitian for people with serious gut issues, just to have like a good objective way of seeing what is going on with their digestive system, so you don't have to guess and stuff of that sort. And that way you can kind of be more precise with your decision making and supplements and food changes, etc. Gut issues could take 3 to all the way 1 year to resolve and stuff of that sort. So you got to be patient with it, but you have to take action on these, because if you have lingering gut issues plus a million other things, your stress load will be high. You'll be constantly fatigued, not feeling well. And then obviously when you're constantly fatigued and not feeling well, you're not going to be able to develop a great looking body and, just enjoy life to its optimal, etc. And then if you have back issues, do a proper posture assessment, a proper spine hygiene assessment, which I do all that with a lot of my clients. I do usually a 1 hour mechanical assessment before even writing out a program for them. And this includes testing for any pain triggers in the spine, particularly the lower back, teaching them about spine hygiene, seeing their posture, their movement, their ability to balance. And it's important to know that when you hear the phrase gut issues or when you hear the phrase back issues, they're very umbrella terms that really don't say too much. Like when a person says, I have back pain, that's pretty much the equivalent of saying, like, my car isn't starting. Okay, cool. Like, your car isn't starting, but what could it be? Is the battery low or is the battery out? Do you not have gas? Do you not have oil? Is the starter not working? Etc. So it's important to not be vague. That's why it's important to really have detailed assessments before beginning any program at all. So if I were to walk into a doctor's office and it was a quick, and this is my first time meeting them rather, and it was a quick 3 to 5 minute Q&A, or a coach, and it was a quick 3 to 5 minute Q&A and a quick waiver sign, I would personally walk away as fast as possible and not get any service from them. A proper assessment before beginning any protocols, even with a healthy individual, is around 3 hours long. I sometimes spend even 4 hours with clients assessing them before even I write out a program, and incorporate weekly follow-ups as well, which is very important. You have to have procedures in place for them to actually do what you're instructing them on how to do, okay? Just giving them information and then saying goodbye for 3 months, come back and check with me 3 months, there's no way the success rate is great there. No way. And if anyone says it, ask them, like, where are all your testimonials? Where are all your successful clients? Next time you walk into the doctor's office, they should, if they're so great, they should have like a myriad, endless client testimonials looking amazing and feeling amazing with having amazing blood work. But if they really put up pictures of their clients, especially in medical offices where they're just basically drug dealers for the most part, in my opinion, you'll see they're still like super overweight, super haggard looking, super sick, super unhealthy, and now just on a bunch of medical drugs. That's how their testimonial wall would look for the most part. Outside of emergency medicine, I love those guys. I feel the rest of the medical community, in my opinion, has just become glorified drug dealers, and that's it. So for example, if you have a rock stuck inside your shoe, they'll tell you to keep it there and take painkillers instead, where, like, in my opinion, I'm like, well, why don't we just take the rock out and just walk pain-free, right? Okay, so back issues. Obviously, if you have also poor posture, you want to also add this to your total stress load umbrella. Poor posture, some common ones, for example, are like upper cross syndrome. You know, you have the rounding of the shoulders, protruding of the head. You have lower cross syndrome, where it's kind of like a Donald Duck shape in their lower back. So their butt's kind of really protruding out, and they have like a large curvature in their lower spine, the last 5 vertebrae of their spine. And you know, some lower doses, some curvature in the low back is okay, but the problem is when you have that lower cross syndrome, it's too excessive, and the facets and the spinous processes on the back, these kind of posterior elements of the back of the spine, end up kind of crashing into each other. And especially if you already have some type of flattening of the disc, the intervertebral disc, the height is lost, and thus the facets or the spinous process end up rubbing against each other and creating arthritic pain in the lower back, which will lead to a higher stress load. So you need to correct that lower cross syndrome, and it's going to vary from person to person on how to do that to relieve those facets, to give those facets a bit more space so they're not rubbing against each other and thus not causing you arthritic pain, and thus reducing your stress load from a musculoskeletal pain perspective. So that's one way of decreasing your stress load, is just getting rid of the actual physical pain and tension in your body. And the other issue with having poor posture, and there could be a myriad of different postural deviations. You have like upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome, military neck, flat back, sway back, hip hike. Shoulder hike is very common, especially with office workers, and they're working on one mouse like this, for example, and their shoulder is chronically higher than the other. Okay, so that's going to create a lot of imbalances in the body eventually, which will create this discrepancy between muscles that are too tight and muscles that are too weak. Okay, so with upper cross syndrome, Elias, good to see you. Felix, Calvin, Chip. I saw a few other people came in, but I'm Hunter, David, but I'm trying to talk. But I do want to interact with you guys. It's always a tough balance between doing this. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to interrupt and shoot them my way. Not a big deal. So okay, but changing your posture, improving your posture will help decrease your stress load too, because whenever you have poor posture, you have a certain group of muscles that are overly elongated, which will cause them to be overly taxed or stretched, and a group of muscles that's also overly tight. Okay, and this chronic tightness could lead to just a lot of stiffness and stuff of that sort, and the muscle being brittle, and thus could increase your stress load. So let me see, looking through my notes here. Toxic load through diet. Okay, cool. So another thing you can do is just improve your diet, right? Just know that when you lose weight on any diet at all, you can pick anything, just as long as you're losing weight, your total inflammation in the body will go down. Thus, the total amount of stress put on your body will go down as well. On top of just carrying less weight is less burden on the joints, will create less shear stress, compression stress on the spine and your joints, etc., even torsion stress, even traction if you're hanging, for example. So that will decrease a lot of tension in the body and thus help relieve the total load and burden on the body on a daily basis from one vantage point. But once again, the key thing is really tackling this from numerous vantage points. And whenever you have any kind of health issue, really staying away from the mindset of, I just need to change this one thing and everything will work out. Like, I just need to work out more and everything will, or I just need to change my diet and everything will fall into place. Or I just need to take this medical drug and everything will fall into place. These are really short-sighted belief systems that I've seen no success with, zero success with. There might be some short-term, whatever, pain relief a little bit here and there, but overall, it's like no change. The person just looks worse and feels worse year after year. And they might think they're feeling better only because the people at their office are looking and feeling way worse. But both of them, both people are in terrible condition. I've given corporate lectures for quite a long time, and I can tell you, it's literally almost impossible to find like a healthy person in a corporate office. So Daryl is saying, great advice. I like sweets and been eating more fruit, especially grapes. Is that helpful? So Daryl, the tough part about always giving advice online is that I never met the person and know their circumstance, right? And because there are no absolutes, and because nature is a novelty generator, there are no two Daryls in the world, right? Even if you had a twin, both of you guys would be dramatically different at this point in your life. So, like for example, with nutrition questions, a lot of people do come out and ask me, like, should I eat this? Should I eat that? And it all depends. It depends on your goal. It depends on your digestive health. Like, can you tolerate that? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to gain weight? Are you very physically active? If you are very physically active, what are you doing for that activity? Are you doing a lot of cardio? Or are you just doing weightlifting? Or are you doing CrossFit style workouts? Or maybe boxing? You know, all of these things are, how much muscle mass do you currently have? Are you trying to maintain the muscle mass? Are you trying to gain muscle mass? All these things are super important to consider when giving people advice for nutrition advice. And obviously, without doing a proper assessment, I won't be able to do that. One thing I could say is you're asking about fruit, especially grapes, and I would recommend no matter what dietary choices people pick, at least get the sourcing well done. And I've covered this tremendously in a lot of other lives, and it's actually the topic of my second book. But for example, with fruit, right? It is very nutritious. I would only recommend, it depends on which stage of progression you're at. All whole fruit is amazing, but I would progress from getting industrially raised fruit, which is grown with a tremendous amount of synthetic biocides, many of which have been proven to cause cancer, to maybe start buying USDA organic certified fruit, at least in the grocery store. That's probably going to be the most realistic option for most people, which will basically eliminate or dramatically decrease your exposure to synthetic biocides and GMOs, okay? And if you're interested in going way above and beyond that, maybe think about growing it at home. You don't need that much space at all, or order it from a local biodynamic grower. I would check out websites like eatwild.com is going to be a great resource. Some good websites, subscription services are farmfresh2u.com. I haven't ordered from them in 6 years. I just kind of don't need it because the place I'm living at now is very close to a couple biodynamic farms and I get a lot of my stuff from them. But that place could be a good resource, farmfresh2u.com. And they're basically an organically certified produce company that you subscribe to, and they deliver a box of fresh vegetables from a local organic farmer to your door, I think once a week, which is how they did it once again many years ago, but I haven't ordered from them for a long time, so I don't know how they're doing it now. But you could also check out websites like eatwild.com. The general idea is you want to, and if you want to go outside even the farming system, which will be the absolute best, but which will require the most work and effort on your part, you can take up wild foraging, right? You can do it anywhere. There are edible wild plants pretty much anywhere you live on the planet, especially if you know how to look for them. That's a skill trait you definitely need to develop. They have, luckily these days it's pretty popular. You can just Google these courses, and I'm sure they have like an instructor in your area that teaches people how to do this on the weekends. So once again, that's time intensive, but the further you step away kind of from farming, especially with fruit and vegetables, the more nutrient dense it's going to be, because some things to consider with grocery store stuff, right? So they need it to look fresh. So they pick the crop out of the ground before it ripens, out of the ground or the tree before it ripens, because they need it to ripen on the way to the grocery store. So as it hits the shelf, it's nice and ripe, and so you're more likely to buy it, obviously. But the problem with that is when it's picked before it ripens, the ripening process is what gives the crop, the fruit in your case, its nutrition. So obviously you're losing a lot of nutrition there already, plus they're grown in a monocrop environment, which pretty much all grocery store fruits and vegetables are grown that way, pretty much, not all. that's going to decrease the nutritional profile of the crop as well. Plus, there is the aspect of looking back, like every crop that you see today has had a wild ancestor that it's been harvested and bred from. So for example, carrots. Carrots started as a white root in Afghanistan and then made it to India a couple hundred years later, where it became a purple carrot. Then made it to China, where it became a red carrot. Then made it to Turkey, I believe, where it became a yellow carrot or white, I forgot exactly. And then made it to a European country, I believe it was Denmark, and then it became an orange carrot. But throughout this breeding process, the anthocyanin content of the carrot went down tremendously. So if you compare the anthocyanin content of like a purple carrot versus an orange carrot, a purple carrot would typically have like 900% more anthocyanins. But orange carrots are good for you as well. I'm just giving you an example of stuff that totally goes under the radar of most people. Like the crops you see in the grocery store today are definitely a far cry from the crops in the wild. They usually don't look anything like it. And usually throughout this breeding process, what farmers did was favor thinner skin and more sugar for phytonutrients. Phytonutrients being those important nutrients that your body needs to actually like be healthy and fight off cancers and all that stuff. So we could talk about this for a long time. I covered it in a lot of other lives, but that's just some things to consider. So it depends on how far you want to go with that. So let me know if that answers it. So, okay. Obviously, reducing your toxic load in food, like I mentioned with Daryl, the easiest thing a lot of you can do is just to transition first into USDA organic certified produce, but then, ideally find like a local farm nearby or stuff of that sort and order your stuff from them, etc. So, like some of the biodynamic farms I volunteered at use 0 biocides, period. Like to kill ladybugs, for example, we killed them by taking a beer bottle, cutting it in half, filling it up with some beer, and basically they would go in there and die. So you don't have to spray your crops and etc. etc. We would filter the water too, just to get a lot of the different chemicals in tap water out as well. So always buy organic. Cool. Yeah, that's a great step, Daryl. The organic label is great. It's a good step in the right direction, but just know it has been weathered down a bit in like the last 10, 15 years or so. So I would check out those sites like eatwild.com, americangrassfed.org or .com, I believe. I forgot the exact name. forceofnature.com is a good one as well, just to get a good reference point. happy-hens.com, stuff of that sort. So Mikhail, good to see you. Cool. Okay. So reducing toxic load is huge. I mean, one other thing you can do is just make sure you're drinking filtered water and never water out of a tap. So there are a tremendous amount of chemicals, including chlorine, in tap water. And a lot of people forget because, once again, it's so common, but chlorine is a dangerous pesticide, So if you're, especially like Daryl he said he's very physically active. If he's eating or if he's drinking like a gallon of that water per day filled with, trace amounts of, let's say, 5-6 parts per million of chlorine, plus like, trace amounts of probably 200 different synthetic chemicals and prescription drugs in that water, it's going to add up quite a bit over his lifespan and maybe cause health complications. But once again, the lower the toxic load, the better you're going to be and stuff of that sort. So, okay. So another thing to consider when reducing your stress is your work environment. This is going to be huge, and you really do need to take this seriously because you're spending, the average person is spending like 8 to 10 hours a day at work. And if your work environment isn't conducive to how you want to be living, this could cause like a tremendous amount of stress on your central nervous system. And that's just how it's going to be. And if, in my opinion, if you just don't leave that environment, you're just going to be on damage control from one degree to another and usually getting worse year after year. I personally haven't seen anyone do well with meditation if, let's say, they do have an intolerable, stressful work environment and their practitioner would say, oh, just meditate more often. I'm like, okay, well, we want to try to avoid, once again, symptom management strategies. If you have a stressful environment that's not conducive to your well-being and not sustainable for your health, you need to, like, in my opinion, like what I would do is leave that environment, okay? And that's it, because what I found is like people that meditate, it maybe does reduce the stress during that meditation interval, but guess what, right? When they come out of meditation, all their stuff, quote unquote, as Walensky would say, comes right back. And if you look up studies on PubMed.gov, you'll see that as people meditate, their cortisol levels do drop off, but as they come out of meditation, cortisol levels just come right back, cortisol being like a stress hormone that we covered a lot in various other videos. So I would say work environment is huge simply because the amount of time you're spending there. It's actually even, you're spending more time in that work environment than you are with your loved ones or on your personal activities or time off in most cases. Okay, so some things to evaluate in your work environment and ask yourself some questions are, you know, you gotta look at your overall picture of like your coworkers. You know, a lot of times, unfortunately, you're going to get that one or two like really annoying or just not trustworthy coworkers and stuff of this sort. And because you're around them for 8 hours a day, this is really going to have like a dragging down effect on your central nervous system, cause your stress and anxiety to be amped up. And then obviously after a while, you're going to become depressed and you're going to have to deal with that as well. So also ask yourself like, hey, sometimes with a lot of work environments, they're so unsustainable these days. They have like one deadline after another, etc., and there doesn't seem to be any end. And I'm not really blaming the companies oftentimes because it is a competitive work environment these days, not only in the work, but also from company to company, because a lot of companies are competing not only locally, but internationally as well. And American workers do get paid a lot more than a lot of workers in pretty much the majority of other countries. So the company does want to get as many quote unquote miles out of you as possible. But just know that at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's like the only thing you really have is your mental and physical health. And once that's gone and you can't show up to work consistently, like they'll just boot you out and get a new person. And then, you know, you not only lost 5 to 10 years of your life working there, but also now you don't have your mental and physical health, which might never get it back, or it might take many years for you to rebound back and feel like your old self again. But guess what? Like, you're killing yourself for your job for sure, but 1 or 2 weeks goes by after you're fired, no one's even gonna remember you. Trust me. And some of the coworkers for sure are not great people, but most of them are, you know, they're okay people. They're just really busy and they have a lot going on in their life. And that's it. You're just going to kind of disappear. So make sure I personally make sure whenever I'm trying to pursue something, it's like, do I have my needs met first? And that sounds kind of selfish, but if you think about it, that is very important. Because if you don't have your needs met, you're going to just grow disgruntled towards that occupation or that person in a relationship, etc., etc. So yeah, and then also, so maybe some things to consider is working remotely. That's up to you to decide, but that could help distance yourself from the social politics of work. Also help reduce your commute to work, which would help you financially a little bit because you don't have to pay as much in gas. And it would give you a little bit more time to sleep in as well, because you don't have to get up earlier to go drive to work, etc., etc. And all these things are very important to consider, and for the most part neglected in most training programs or health approaches. So stuff of that sort. So sick, drug use, yeah. And also just the energy at work. I'm a big advocate of remote work if you can do it, but just the energy at work is important to consider too, you know, with probably 30% of your coworkers being on some kind of psychiatric drug, which is a bit scary. If you're around that energy, it's going to negatively impact you. So by going off to remote work, it will help you distance yourself from that, buy you more time, and could help decrease your stress levels quite a bit. So another important thing to consider is also your at-home environment. Maybe keeping like a clean room is very important. Once again, all these things so easy to understand. I get that, but are you really honestly doing all of this? You know, are you taking action on it? And one thing I do see people, especially with the work situation, is instead of taking action on it and fixing it, what they do is start reframing and turning the negative into the positive, which acts basically as quicksand. And it kind of sinks you deeper into misery as time goes on through basically cognitive dissonance. So they go like, oh, you know, I don't like my work, but I like the pay, or I like the retirement plan, or I like the health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And they kind of justify a belief system that's no longer facilitating them in a positive way. So another thing to consider is like finances. Finances cause people stress as well. So, you know, like I mentioned on many other lives, the average American spends $8,000 to $16,000 on non-essential expenses every year, such as alcohol, eating out with coworkers, eating out on the weekends, having takeout, traveling, etc., etc. And unfortunately, a lot of these, pretty much all of these expenses provide nothing but sugar highs at best. And that's it, nothing more, but then the money is definitely gone. And according to Robert Kawasaki, the average American has like less than $1,000 saved up to their name. So obviously this is going to put them in a deep myopic and stressful state and make them work jobs they don't like. But for example, if you do have financial autonomy and you don't like your work, you'd be like, well, you know, I at least have enough money and autonomy to be able to sustain my essential needs. And I could leave this company and take a little break, regroup, and then try to find another place that's more in tune and aligned to my core values and stuff of that sort. But if you keep spending your money on all these like non-essential purchases, like the biggest one is travel. Yes, I used to travel a lot as well, but I would recommend, like, if, for example, in my opinion, if I were very overweight on a bunch of medical drugs, like, I definitely wouldn't be spending that money on traveling or non-essential expense. It's always like puzzling to me when I see someone that's like not doing well health-wise or like considerably overweight taking a selfie at a fast food place or with their frappuccino in plastic where it's like 200 grams of sugar probably in that frappuccino. It's like, why would you take a picture next to something that's clearly causing you like physical and mental pain? You know, that's causing all that inflammation in your body, and then your body doesn't look great and it lowers your self-esteem, which causes a myriad of other issues socially, directly and indirectly. Not calling anyone out, not fat shaming at all, but I'm just saying these topics need to be brought up to light so people can see like that they're normalizing pathology and can stop doing it to themselves, because oftentimes pretty much the bulk majority of health issues are just people doing it to themselves over long periods of time. So if you don't change the person that's causing the health issue A, probably never disappears, and if it does for some miraculous reason, it always ends up coming back. So if you don't change the person that's causing the problem always keeps coming back, obviously. Or, you know, you see a lot of guys, for example, they're very sick on who knows how many psychiatric drugs, and they're traveling. You know, they're spending $3,000 to $4,000 going on a 2-week European trip just to return back after those 2 weeks to the very job and environment that's causing all of their mental and physical pathology. And now you're down $2,000 to $3,000. I personally would rather take that money, hire a good coach to get me out of that normalized state of pathology, or, you know, just buy a bunch of books or do a bunch of courses and become my own mechanic instead of spending that money on sugar highs at best, you know? And it's sad, and a lot of people will hear this and do nothing about it and keep on copying and pasting their normalized pathology throughout their life. And unfortunately, some of them have kids, and then they pass these ideas on to their kids, unfortunately. But stuff of that sort. So finances. Another thing I always found hilarious is that some people are like super stuck on their retirement plans, right? They're like, oh, you know, or their health insurance plan, and their job is unsustainable. You know, they have crazy deadlines that they're not able to sustain 2-week breaks, which is ridiculous per week. Crazy hours behind the computer, which is not normal at all. And they're like, well, I have health insurance. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, health insurance isn't even really that expensive. And A, so B, also, like, if you weren't working that job, you wouldn't even need that health insurance. And even if you do need that health insurance, what are you getting from it? You're just getting medical drugs and surgeries, which once again are symptom management approaches, which I never see working. I never see symptom management approaching working. Once again, if you have a rock stuck inside your shoe, like, how stupid does it sound when someone tells you, keep that rock there and just take painkillers instead? I'm like, dude, let's get rid of that rock. So instead of learning how to live and survive in that cesspool, let's just get you out of that cesspool to clear your head, get you away from all those toxic coworkers, away from those crazy, all those toxic coworkers that are on a bunch of psychiatric drugs, away from all those crazy hours behind the computer, and get you living like a human being again. And naturally, just your health will probably rebound back. I've actually never seen it not rebound back. So stuff of that sort. So, and then also the retirement plan, which is kind of like a silly concept too, because I see sometimes a 50-year-old guy that's like, 50 pounds overweight and on a bunch of medical drugs, and they're like, well, at least I have a retirement plan. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but what are you planning on? Think about it. You're like 50 pounds overweight. The average American dies at 75. You're 50 years old now. You're going to retire at 65 or 68 or whatever it is now, and then you have like 7 years to enjoy your life. Quote unquote enjoy, but by that time, they're so mentally and physically broken and so addicted to a lifestyle of pathology, they don't even know what to do with their free time when they do actually retire. And most of it is actually spent just attending to health issues. Very different. Like, how silly is that? I'm going to spend 40 years working to a retirement plan that I'm thinking of using for 7 years. But remember, since this person is very unhealthy and overweight, they probably won't even make it to 75. So they probably won't even use their retirement plan, which a lot of people don't. They die way earlier than they retire. Remember, you have about 800 to 900,000 Americans dying from heart attacks every single year, and 125,000 dying from strokes every single year. And overall, cumulatively, you have about like 1.8 million Americans dying from preventable issues every single year. So when I say the average American dies at 75, remember, like, a tremendous amount of people died before then. So, okay, cool. Save up for your retirement plan then. Okay, let's see here. Another thing that could help is what's helped me personally is just kind of adopting more. And I've been actually like this my whole entire life. And I grew up with my grandmother in Ukraine, off-grid. Back then it was the USSR still, with almost no materialistic possessions outside of what was essential for survival. And I pretty much carried that on. I did start buying a little bit of stuff here and there, like little purchases after college, but nothing crazy. And even now, I mean, I just live like a very minimalist lifestyle. As you guys can see, I have like 10 black shirts and like 2 white shirts, 1 pair of jeans, 2 shoes, like one for the gym, and basically hiking kind of boot. And as you can see here, these books, I have a PS4, and I'm looking to minimalize it even more. So I have all this stuff now, but I'm looking to bring it down even more. I'm kind of doing a couple year progression of doing this. Like even today, after this call, I'm going to go and actually have a box right here with a bunch of random. So I used to collect, one of my favorite movies was the Alien series, right? Alien 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the prequels. So I used to collect all these guys, and I have pretty much all of the figurines. And I'm gonna go. I found a store that buys these, and I'm just gonna go sell them after the call because I consider them like non-essential at this point. And I'm really just trying to kind of establish more of a minimalist lifestyle, more and more of that. And then I have 2 other things which I consider essential. So I got the hunting rifle and then also a pistol as well. But that's pretty much it. And so trying to keep it like very, very minimalist. And not only will this obviously save you a lot of time, save you a lot of money, which it would, but also it'll save you a lot of time in the sense that you don't have to watch over a lot of stuff. By the way, I do have an iPhone, which I'm using here, and I do have a laptop for work. I do work remotely, so I have those things. I'm trying to phase out of that as well. I just haven't come up with a solution for that quite yet. So I might be using those for a little while. But just to give you an idea, it's really not that much stuff. And then like I bought like a used Ford C-Max quite a long while back, and I paid it off, so I don't even have a car payment for that. So let me see where I was at. So yeah, not only will that obviously save you a lot of money, but also it'll just save you a lot of time because you don't have to look after everything, right? Okay, and the less stuff you have to look over, just the more rested you can be, the more time you can spend resting and focusing on, like I love to read like 2 to 3 books a month, so get longer workouts in without feeling rushed. I only work 2 days a week, which is huge as well. Usually just on Mondays and Tuesdays, and then I do random stuff like this on Saturdays and stuff of that sort. So I also found with me personally, everyone is different, but with me personally, just outside of your basic needs, materialistic things just really brought me sugar highs at best. I may have been maybe happy for like sometimes even just an hour or maybe a few days or a few weeks, and then that's it, you know, it dissipated, but then the money was gone too. So I began to see those patterns over the years, and I'm like, hey, you know, like next time I think about buying, it's like, do I really need this, and will it really add a lot of value to my life? And I would say, for me at least, no, but everyone is different. So, okay, so another thing you can do is, I do a lot of work with personality types with my clients as well. So I have a test that helps identify their personality type, and then you can learn how to properly manage that personality type. And also it gives you, it provides you a graph of how healthy you are in that, what is it called? In the expression of that personality. And there are 9 different personality types, and just know like every personality type has a main fear associated to it. So like for example, if you're a type 1, a perfectionist, you know, their greatest fear is I am imperfect, so they spend their entire life trying to prove that they are perfect. Or a type 3 is I am worthless, so they try to spend their entire life proving that they are worthy. And this pursuit oftentimes could lead a person to a lot of stress. So it's important to go back, identify their false core, their greatest fear, and learn to discard it over time and not let it fuel their motivation and fuel a lot of their stress. That's going to be a very important part of the journey as well. Because a lot of times we covered a lot of external environment stuff here, but you need to attend to the internal environment too. Because oftentimes it's the person, like I mentioned, that's causing their own problems. And if you don't change the person, the problems keep coming back. So for example, if you know, the person doesn't resolve their greatest fear, they could leave their job, for example, and then just go to another job and copy and paste exactly what they're doing to cause themselves stress in that other job, for example, or relationship, whatever. Because as the saying goes, wherever you go, there you are. You can't run away from yourself no matter how fast you run, right? In every personality type, I mean, there are different things that go on with it, but some personality types, like a type 4, for example, has like a distinct fantasy self that they're constantly comparing themselves to. They have this like idealized fantasy self, and they always see themselves as beneath that idealized fantasy self and constantly striving for that. And that could cause a person to feel a lot of stress because they're never good enough. And it's usually an unrealistic, distorted perception of how they should be. And they spend a lot of times, if they're not consciously aware of this and it happens under the radar, they can spend their entire life pursuing this fantasy self and just feeling more and more empty as time goes on. So there are obviously a lot more topics we can cover. this is just scratching the surface for the most part, but I hope it shows you that any kind of health issue does need to be approached from a myriad of different angles to have a complete resolution of that health issue. That's super important. If you just approach it from one issue, like imagine if, like in my opinion, if I walked into a doctor's office and I said I was really stressed and they just gave me anti-anxiety medication, which I've had happen in my early college days, and I didn't take it because I knew deep down inside of me that was the wrong approach. It didn't address all this stuff. Imagine where I would be today, you know? Nowhere. Feeling worse and looking worse than ever before. I've never personally seen someone take psychiatric drugs, antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds without doing all of this stuff that we mentioned and getting better. They just look worse and feel worse year after year. They look freaking terrible usually. And that's because instead of taking the rock out of their shoe, they're keeping the rock there and taking painkillers instead, which I've never seen work long term. I personally would never take that approach ever. So I hope this helped, and it was good to see you guys, and have a good weekend. Take care.